dealt with a long hangover on that. The team itself, I don't think, was dealing with any of that kind of thing. Heath Williams says family first. Yeah, that's what we try to do. I mean, pretty clearly when I'm, 100 years old, hopefully, looking back on my life, the time that you spend with, your family is going to be the thing that matters to you most then. So I try to keep that in mind right now. Terry says, what about Todd Monken? We're going to talk more about Todd Monken here in a moment, a part of a pretty interesting story over the course of the weekend that we will talk to you about here in a little bit, for sure. What else? Any other comments before we get rolling here today? It's going to be a fun show. A lot to talk about. A lot of SEC news. I'll tell you this, too. I don't want to do all of this now because I want to get into it later on. But, man, these Georgia coaches that leave and go become head coaches, I think one of the things that's really amazing is how they all have a plan. And listen, sometimes the plans work out, sometimes they don't. But they hit the ground running with their plan. I am very impressed with how prepared the Georgia assistants that become head coaches are. Very, very impressed with that. And we'll talk more about that a little bit. 912 Dog says, when do the Dogs get to Miami? They will arrive on the 26th. They're flying in there that day. They will probably get there before I do, to be totally honest. They'll get there before I do, but we will start DawgNation Daily there on Monday morning, which is the 27th. But the team arrives on the 26th. And then really all the events themselves start happening, 27th or so. There won't be a ton of news come out of Miami on the 26th. But by the 27th or so, there will be. The lead up to a big bowl game like this, there's just a lot going on. There's a lot. It's a very busy week. You get a chance to hear from a lot of coaches, a lot of players. There's just more to that. And this is one of those things where, like, the average fan doesn't care much about media stuff, but the bowls are a pretty big deal from a media standpoint. And the way that impacts the average fan is there's just going to be a lot more to cover, a lot more people speaking, a lot more chances to witness practice. At least, typically speaking, that's been the case. So there'll just be a lot more that comes out of this time of year than a normal football game. So that's kind of fun. GA King 1989 says, do you think they turn Pickens loose in Miami? I think the problem is, and listen, nobody loves George Pickens more than I do, but he just came back from an ACL injury. They limited him in the SEC championship game, not because they don't believe that George Pickens is a good player. They limited him in the SEC championship game because he's just coming back from an ACL injury. That hopefully he's healthier now than he was on the first Saturday in December. But all of this is really dependent on how healthy he is a few more weeks removed from that ACL injury. So the extent to which they can turn him loose is going to be all health related. It is possible to be back and be playing, but still not be 100% of what you once were. And if Pickens' snaps are limited, that's obviously why that is. They clearly know how good of a player George is, but if he's limited, it's based on the health situation. Bama's itch, that is correct. There are no travel limits on bowl roster, so everybody gets to go. Let's see what else. Randy Hall says in the last 15 years, UGA has signed 6 out of the 15 number one players in the state. Yeah, so I've seen people talk about that. I'm not really quite sure what that means necessarily. I mean, you can say that for a while maybe Georgia just wasn't recruiting as well as it should. Also, when the number one play, I mean, it's been weird, right? It's been all over the board. For a while, it seemed like Georgia was kind of prioritizing national recruiting in a way that it wasn't prioritizing in-state recruiting. The 2021 class kind of changed that. I think for the most part, Georgia's done pretty well with most of the top-rated players in the state for this cycle there, too. Certainly plenty of them. Number one player, obviously, Travis Hunter, makes the shocking decision last week to go Jackson State instead. But I have seen some folks talking about that. All right, so good stuff all the way around. It's John Stinchcomb coming up. Plenty of your comments when we're done for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Some very interesting stuff around the SEC. We'll cover all of that. But to begin with, pretty interesting report out there involving Georgia offensive coordinator Todd Monken, what he chose to do, at least reportedly, what that means for UGA. We will get into all of that. In fact, let's do it right now. It's DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I want to begin today's show with kind of an interesting news report from over the weekend that we don't have any reason to believe isn't 100% accurate, if that's a double negative. The point is, this seems like this is kind of what went down here. I think it's pretty revealing for UGA, and I think it's the kind of thing that Georgia fans ought to notice. And frankly, just given the way the program has kind of trended the last couple of years, this is the kind of thing I think you ought to be pretty excited about. A lot of folks have kind of wondered, well, how well is Georgia going to hold on to its assistant coaches during the offseason? And, Dan Lanning, defensive coordinator, got an offer he couldn't refuse to go be Oregon head coach. It's a very big job for a young coach to get a chance to be a part of. And so, therefore, he moves on to become a head coach. And you knew, just given the success that Georgia's had, that there was going to be some opportunities for Georgia assistants to move on to better jobs. You've just been kind of wondering, well, how many more names and how many more of these rumors might Georgia fans have to endure here? Well, apparently there was also an issue on the offensive side of the ball there as well, but this has apparently resolved itself pretty quickly and in the favor of Georgia. You know that Brian Kelly has been hired as LSU head coach, and obviously he's looking to fill his staff out there. Apparently, he has come after Georgia offensive coordinator Todd Monken, and apparently he's gotten the stiff arm. Apparently, he's been rebuffed. Apparently, he was told no by Monken, at least according to the folks at Football Scoop. Let me read you a couple of sentences here related to the Monken thing. This from John Bryce. I love what Football Scoop does. It's not an ad here, but I do think they do a good job covering this stuff because you got to have a niche in life, and Football Scoop, for the most part, their niche are these coaching things. In fact, I think the website used to be called coachingsearch.com, and they finally changed it to Football Scoop because that was just a little bit more broad. But they are kind of in on the coaching rumor mill. I love the coaching rumor mill, and I love the way they coach this. I should say they cover that. So here's what John Bryce writes over the weekend, footballscoop.com. Multiple sources told Football Scoop that Brian Kelly, the LSU head coach, had discussed the offensive coordinator position with Georgia play caller Todd Monken. Those sources said Monken has expressed a desire to remain with the Bulldogs. So given the money that by the way, it's John Bryce, Football Scoop, who reports that. So given the money that Brian Kelly's making as LSU head coach, it stands to reason that for his offensive coordinator, as important a role as that is, LSU probably also had the authority to spend big here, try to steal a guy like Todd Monken away from UGA. Not able to do that. Todd Monken, according to Football Scoop, says he's expressed a desire to remain at UGA. Now, we have every reason to believe that Bryce's reporting on this is accurate. We also, will acknowledge that just because you turn down the LSU job doesn't mean that if the, NFL team called you and wanted you to be their offensive coordinator, that a guy like Todd Monken might not take that job, or small school to be head coach or something like that. There may be jobs out there that Monken would like to have other than Georgia offensive coordinator. But this is, I think, a pretty big deal here that a school like LSU that seemingly, they offered reportedly Jimbo Fisher $13 million a year to be their head coach. Money right now for LSU isn't an option whatsoever, and yet big bucks possibly offered to Todd Monken. Monken says he wants to stay at Georgia. Now, this is interesting to me for two reasons. First of all, it's very good for Georgia when you look at the year-over-year success and improvement for the Georgia offense. We've been talking about this a lot. That the Georgia offense over the course of the last couple of years has clearly been trending the right direction. 2020 compared to 2019, way better. 2021 in comparison to 2020, also way better. In Todd Monken's 2 years as Georgia offensive coordinator, the success has been built on in each of those 2 years. And it stands to reason that, assuming Monken does come back in 2022, Football Scoop saying that he wants to, that once again, Georgia will have a chance to build on that success even more. And by the way, we may do more on this in tomorrow's show, that when you look at where Georgia could go if it improves at almost the same rate next season that it has over the course of the last 2 seasons, that there's really not much left to accomplish other than be in that category of truly elite offenses. That if there's more growth for a Monken offense coming back here in 2022, what you're really getting to is an offense that all of a sudden really does start to replicate and resemble what the very best offense in the country are, because that's kind of the only threshold left for Georgia to achieve there based on the way in which this offense grew in Monken's first year and the way the offense grew again in Monken's second year. The notion of a third year of Todd Monken is the kind of thing that ought to get Georgia fans excited. And then there's this, and I'm somewhat hesitant to weigh into this. I told y'all 2 Fridays ago that I wouldn't bring up quarterback again on this show at the beginning, in our conversation. I wouldn't bring up quarterback again until I had a relevant reason to do so. Well, I think we do kind of have a little bit of a relevant reason to bring this up now. Smart did address the quarterback thing the other day. By the way, as I'm speaking here today, Kirby Smart's also doing another press conference here for this week. That'll be available on the DawgNation YouTube page a little later on this late morning, early afternoon. You'll get a chance to see that then there. But in Smart's press conference last week, he brought up the quarterback situation again. And listen, at a certain point, everything that can be said about this has been said about it. A lot of you are on the records in your belief that you'd like to see JT Daniels start in the college football playoff. I've kind of acknowledged the fact that, hey, given what Georgia did do against Alabama, maybe it makes some sense to try something different. Maybe it makes some sense to try a guy that you once tabbed as your starting quarterback. You at least believed in him enough at the beginning of the season to make him your guy. Maybe going back to him now at least makes some sense. I've certainly acknowledged that. But I've also said, and this is where it kind of puts me in different company than some of you, I've also said that if Smart doesn't do that, he must have a good reason for doing so. Smart knowing what he knows, seeing what he sees, being behind closed doors for the inner workings of the entirety of the program, this decision specifically, that if Smart continues to make this decision, that he must have a good reason for doing that. And some of you have said, well, no, he doesn't. Smart's an egomaniac. Smart's clearly shown an inability to handle the quarterback situation. And if he handles this one wrong based on your certainty that you know better than Smart on this, that it's going to cost Kirby Smart somehow. That there's going to be, in fact, some of you have even said, hey, Todd Monken ain't sticking around for this. Todd Monken ain't going to be here at Georgia in 2022 if this is the way the quarterback situation gets handled at Georgia. Todd Monken's not signing up for this. This isn't what Todd Monken signed up for. There's no way Todd Monken wants to hang around and be a part of this situation there at quarterback. Well, all of a sudden now we have a fairly strong report from Football Scoop, though, that Todd Monken does want to be here in 2022. That somehow, some way, we are left to conclude from that Monken is comfortable with how the Georgia quarterback situation is playing out, even though it's strange, even though it's unorthodox, even though I struggle at times to explain why all of this is happening. Those who are on the inside who know more are kind of okay with the decision that's being made. And once again, this is only relevant now because Smart spoke about this last week. We haven't played this audio yet on the show. Being asked directly about, hey, moving into the college football playoff, is this a chance and an opportunity to reevaluate the quarterback situation? Is this a chance for you to maybe think more about playing JT Daniels and not playing Stetson Bennett? And by the way, why are you playing Stetson Bennett instead of JT Daniels? All of this was asked to Smart last week. And I want you to listen to Smart's words. These words are frustrating to some of you. But the question I think you got to ask yourself is, does it make you more comfortable with Smart's explanation if you now, at least on the basis of circumstantial evidence, have reason to believe that Todd Monken is also okay with these decisions that are being made? And we think that because apparently, according to Football Scoop, Monken wants to come back to Georgia next year. So listen to Kirby Smart through that lens, that everything that Smart is saying, apparently Todd Monken, who's got options and who's a respected offensive mind, apparently he's okay with all of this too. Kirby from last week.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer all those questions. There's like three of them in there, but at the end of the day, I think we have four really good quarterbacks in our system. I really feel confident in four guys that can play quarterback for us. I continue to say and repeatedly say both those guys are evaluated each and every day. Stetson did some really good things in the Alabama game. He made a couple bonehead plays as well that he has not played and he has not done in the past. Just like we reassess every single position, just like I said after the game, we reassess everything by how you practice, what you do, and everything you do. But his feet have been a blessing for us. His ability to run, scramble, make things open, make plays with his feet have been good. He made a couple poor decisions in the last game, but he's not the only one that did that. So we'll continue to evaluate it.
So as I said before, I was very hesitant to even bring this up today because I feel like the quarterback thing has just been done and done and done. But I do think this new information possibly provides a new lens to look at all this through. There are a lot of Georgia fans that are just not quite so sure they trust Kirby when it comes to quarterback situations, quarterback decisions. In fact, some of you are convinced that you don't trust him, that the lingering effects of the Jake Fromm, Justin Fields thing from 2018 affects the way that you view Kirby Smart on this now, that you're just suspicious of Smart's reasoning for doing things with the quarterback the way that he does. However, most of those people who I've heard from, and believe me, they make their voice heard, most of the people that I've heard from on that, though, do kind of trust Todd Monken. They do kind of believe that Monken's a guy worth having around, that this is the best offensive coordinator that Georgia has had during the Smart era. This is the kind of guy that can lead Georgia in the right direction when it comes to offense. Well, now you know, at least you have reason to believe that Todd Monken, given a chance to go somewhere else and do it his own way, that if he's in handcuffs because Kirby Smart wants to be, man ball or whatever Smart wants to be, Todd Monken had the escape raft. He had the escape, vehicle that he could have, left on. He could have gone and gotten big dollars at LSU, and he could have gone and run the offense his way with the quarterback he wanted to pick. Well, apparently that's not quite what Todd Monken wanted to do. According to Football Scoop, Todd Monken's kind of excited maybe about coming back to UGA. Now, who knows how that changes in a couple of weeks? Maybe he gets an NFL job or something like that. Maybe he leaves after that. But he didn't leave for LSU, at least according to Football Scoop, and that, to me, gives you a new context for Kirby Smart's words in the quarterback position. And this is one of those things that as you move into the Orange Bowl time, I really don't expect Smart's language on the quarterback to change all that much. The way that he has talked about this is the way that I believe he will continue to talk about it. At least that's every sense that I get, is they are very comfortable with the decision they have made. And the decision has been made, and to me, it doesn't show much evidence of changing, whether it be Michigan in the semifinal or whatever maybe happens after that. And you're left to wonder why, and I'm right there with you. But in terms of who's on board, apparently you can add Todd Monken to the Kirby Smart train on this in terms of kind of being okay with how this quarterback situation is playing out right now. By the way, we'll talk more about Monken in a moment later on in the show, about that matchup specifically with Michigan coming up in the Orange Bowl, the Georgia offense against the Michigan defense. I think that's an important examination. We'll do more of that coming up in the show before we're done today. Before that, though, let me remind you that I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Happy to have all of you with us today. No matter how you get to us, whether it be 9:45 for our first and 15, 10 a.m. on video, all kinds of video platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all of those platforms that you see our show on. Of course, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. Great to be with the folks there in Athens on the radio each and every day. That's always a lot of fun. Podcast form, did I say this already? The Apple Player, Spotify, worldfamousdognation.com. Bunch of ways for you to get the show. We appreciate you getting it however you get it. And I am grateful for the studio we get to do the show in, for the platforms we get to be on, and we wouldn't have any of that if not for our great sponsors. And thank you so much as we roll through the end of this year into the start of a new year. Thank you so much for supporting those that support DawgNation Daily, including our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Such an important time to think about better windows and doors, because they improve the curb appeal of your home. They just kind of look better on the outside, which is kind of a nice thing, but also they make your home feel better on the inside, especially right now. It's cold this morning. And cold air on the outside means you want heat in the inside, and it's probably never been more expensive to heat your home than it is right now, at least with the prices kind of the way they are. That means you want to keep that energy inside your home, right? You don't want that heat escaping through inefficient windows and doors, and that's where our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia can step in. Whether you stop by and see them in their showroom, which is a beautiful place, we're going to be talking a lot more to you about that as we head through the new year, or if you just want to kind of start your shopping experience online, or maybe reach out by phone and talk to one of the Pella installation experts, they can talk about all your options with you, and they can show you what they have for you and why the quality of a Pella window or a Pella door is so much better than just kind of your run-of-your-mill stuff. That's what Pella Window and Door of Georgia can do for you. Also right now, how about great savings? Never been a better time to save money. Pella Window and Door of Georgia offers that for you, including 40% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 24 months. So a couple of different ways for you to get in touch. Make sure you find them today. It's PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. That's the website. PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. Also, give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. We'll get John Stinchcomb here coming up in just a little bit. Fun conversation with John. And as I said before, we'll look more at Todd Monken, the chess match going on between he and Michigan defensive coordinator Mike McDonald. That's kind of a fun conversation. We'll do some of that here before we're done, as we spend a lot of time in the days ahead getting you ready for Georgia-Michigan Orange Bowl. What an incredible showdown that's going to be. We're going to do our part to get you ready for that here over the course of our time together. Before that, though, it's Around the Doghouse, and it's assisted today by our friends at AAA. And while Georgia is in its pursuit of the college football playoff and in pursuit of a national championship, the hay is apparently not completely in the barn as of yet for the 2022 signing class either. And you kind of know this. Georgia's still out there pursuing some big names. And apparently, according to UGA staffer David Cooper, there may be a pretty good chance that Georgia gets one of these big names before it's all said and done. In fact, one of the big name signees is kind of also engaging with Coach Coop on this. I want to show you this on Twitter. Cooper putting it out there that they thought this 2022 signing class was all wrapped up. He says, okay, basically mocking the idea that Georgia's done yet. And then, as he likes to call himself, Julio Humphrey says, for real, people just don't know what Georgia's about to do there. So, obviously, Humphrey has pretty quickly become a big fan favorite with how active he's been on social media in terms of supporting UGA. There was that kind of weird 24, 36-hour period where he wasn't saying much on social media, and some folks kind of got a little concerned about that. But for the most part, he's been just great as far as touting UGA and talking up who Georgia's going to get. And with Cooper kind of doing the same thing there, though, your mind pretty quickly goes to a guy like Ernest Green, the offensive lineman that'll be making his announcement come January. You start thinking about Shamar Stewart, who's going to be kind of out there rolling into the month of February. That's obviously still be discussed there. There are other big names kind of out there for Georgia to be talked about, to be looked at. And apparently Georgia going to be still a factor here in these decisions coming down to the end on all of that. By the way, it's also kind of fun to see. Talk about Coach Coop living it up and having a nice time there. Nice photos of him over the weekend, hanging out in the Hawk Suite, talking about the Coop Cabana. So they're clearly having a good time and being very active on social media. So you've got a couple of decisions coming up in January that Georgia fans are going to be very closely paying attention to. You've got the Shamar Stewart thing there as well, which is kind of a factor there too. So interesting to see a little bit of chatter out there about Georgia already with a top 3 class here for the 2022 class, and apparently not done with all of that either. So that is certainly fun to consider, and that is Around the Doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA, and we certainly appreciate AAA when it comes to legendary roadside assistance this time for the holiday time of year. I'm on the move and traveling around a lot, visiting family, visiting friends, and also getting ready to go down to South Florida there as well, taking my whole family with me down to South Florida. And when we're doing all of that, we're happy to have AAA with us as we're traveling. But AAA also a name for you to know when it comes to auto insurance there as well, because when you switch and save with AAA, you're going to get huge savings for doing so. That's one of the things that AAA is certainly famous for. You can go to AAA.com/auto insurance and find out more about that. The big savings that come your way via AAA and auto insurance. It is a name to know for auto insurance. So I said it before, check out AAA.com/auto insurance. Also, let me give you a number to dial if you just want to talk to somebody directly about the auto insurance options you have from AAA. How about 866-380-1637? That's 866-380-1637. That's a number to dial. You can learn more about AAA via all of that there as well. All right, it's great to have you here. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. A lot going on around the SEC that we want to get to. We'll talk to you about that, including some big news with new Oregon head coach Dan Lanning, a former SEC quarterback. Pretty big addition for Lanning in his first year there at Oregon there at Eugene. Also a tie for UGA backing on this too, which we'll talk more about in a moment. But for now, on everything, on Georgia's preparations for the Orange Bowl, on Georgia's preparations for the college football playoff and its shot at winning a national championship, let's do a Classic City Lager Insider Update. Let's talk to John Stinchcomb right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always great to have John Stinchcomb here on the program. Great to talk some Georgia football with him. And, John, these countdown is now on, getting ready for that Orange Bowl. Big game going to be here before you know it. Obviously, 2 big, huge brands and a chance for Georgia to win a national championship here over the course of what it hopes is 2 more games here this season. I think as of now, you can start to feel, and obviously Christmas is kind of on the horizon for a lot of folks before that, but as of now, you can start to feel that college football playoff start to inch a little bit closer, and the whether it be the vibe coming out of Athens where the team is busy at work or whatever else, signing day is kind of behind you. You sort of look at that game against Michigan as kind of that next big thing, and it's not too soon to start really paying close attention to that.
It's right around the corner, and it's going to be a fun couple of weeks. Obviously, folks should be pretty pumped about this coming weekend's festivities with Christmas on the horizon, but there should be another gift in store for all Dog fans, and that comes a week later in Miami. So good couple of weeks coming up for all of us, but especially for Dog fans.
You and I do a show each week called Chase for the Championship, where we talk a lot about those playoff angles for Georgia, what needs to happen as Georgia gets ready for a college football playoff game. And last week on the show, this was shortly after Kirby Smart had done his press conference last week, the quarterback issue kind of came up, and I was very candid and honest with you in saying that at this point, I just don't have a lot left to say about this. A lot of Georgia fans wish Smart would make a different decision. Smart shows no signs of making that decision that some fans wish that he would make. I'm kind of content to assume that Smart has a good reason for doing what he's doing, even if I can't fully explain what it is. And that, to me, is kind of the end of the discussion. This is one of those things where it's not resolving itself the way that some fans want, but it's also not, at a certain point, you can't force that situation to change. It just kind of is what it is. However, I guess the new information here is that there were reports out there that Todd Monken had a chance to leave UGA, could have gone to LSU. It is a lateral move. He could have gotten a lot of money for making that lateral move. Apparently, according to the folks at Football Scoop, Monken wants to stay at Georgia. That doesn't sound like an offensive coordinator who's frustrated by this. So for the Georgia fan that's not sure that he trusts Kirby Smart on the quarterback thing, but most of these Georgia fans have said good things about Todd Monken. They seem to believe in his ability to run a good offense. If Monken's also on board with this too, then, John, shouldn't that change the way that some people have kind of viewed this quarterback situation over these last few weeks, that apparently Todd Monken, who's got options to go other places, who's been a play caller in the NFL, who's been a head coach at the college level, who's been around the block and really provided some credibility since being here with this Georgia offense over the last couple of years, if he's okay with this there as well, shouldn't that add more context to this discussion?
Yes, and if fans have been out there thinking that it's just Todd Monken has sat back idly as Coach Smart is individually handpicked Stetson to be the guy, and so Todd's just going to go with the flow as the head coach whims dictate. That's not the case. I mean, the offensive staff meets constantly. Coach Monken has probably the loudest voice in the discussion, specifically about the quarterback position as to who's going to be tasked with directing this team game in and game out. And so I think it very much lends credibility to the decisions that are being made. Coach Monken's background, he's been at every level. He's found success, and I think he's done a tremendous job with this offense. And, I understand the frustration of the fans. It's tough to have 7 losses in a row to Alabama, and with that, you feel sorry for yourself and you point fingers. And I'm not talking about fans; I'm talking about myself as a Georgia fan, because you're tired of it. And there's a good thing and a bad thing that's happening for Georgia right now, and it's the good news is you had 3.5 weeks to look at your mistakes and continue to work on it as a team, and those players have had those opportunities to not only correct and see where they went wrong, but also look forward to another game and another important matchup against Michigan that could very well lead to a redemption story, if you will, from what happened a couple weeks ago in the SEC championship. The bad news for fans is you had 3.5 weeks. You have 3.5 weeks between an ugly loss to Alabama and the next opportunity our team has to get out there and prove that was an anomaly. And the elite defense that we talk about, and this being Georgia's year, those things still very much can hold true. But you have to go out there and prove it on December 31st. So 3.5 weeks is a long time. It's a long time to get ready. It's great for players and coaches to kind of hit reset and focus in on some fundamentals and correct mistakes. But for fans, it gives us an opportunity to kind of stew on what went wrong. And for this fan base, it's, there's plenty of distrust in Stetson's play, but it certainly hadn't come from the coaching staff. They seem to be all on board.
Here's the other thing I'll say about Todd Monken. I've been very consistent on this. If you want to go back to like last winter, I'm talking about the beginning of the calendar year, at a time in which, folks assumed that JT Daniels would be Georgia quarterback, and there was this discussion of, well, how good could Daniels be? John, you can go back and find a lot of instances back then where at the time I said the most important figure for Georgia right now is Todd Monken. That it's really Monken that has the chance to be the transformational figure for this offense, and that the success of the players that play in the offense will largely be dependent on what kind of scheme that Monken puts out there for them. Now, I think this season, Monken has taken another big step forward in terms of designing an offensive system that works. And frankly, John, as you head into the college football playoff, my overall opinion of Monken hasn't changed, that he is potentially the most important figure in the entire program right now. That the guy that has a chance to push the button that leads to Georgia winning a national championship may be Monken as much as anybody. It's not a personnel thing of, I'm going to play this guy instead of playing that guy. It's about designing an offense that gives you a chance to get enough against a great Michigan defense to advance in that game. And who knows what happens after that. But just to stay on the Orange Bowl here for a moment, that if you ask me as a fan who's on my mind, maybe more than anything else going into this game, we're going to talk more about this later on the show, but who's on my mind going into this game against Michigan in a couple of weeks as who has the biggest opportunity to really create that win for Georgia? John, I'd probably put Monken on that list as much as I'd put anybody on there, because what he does with the personnel that he has available to him, and yes, you've had injuries at wide receiver, and yes, you've had whatever else you kind of want to get into on all that, but somehow, some way, Georgia's figured out a way this season. If he can figure out a way against Michigan as well coming up here in a couple of weeks, then Todd Monken will have really put his stamp on this Georgia team and this Georgia season. To me, that's one of the biggest storylines going into the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Coach Monken has taken this offense, and we've taken a giant leap forward in our ability to attack defenses in a variety of ways. I think what has really typified this season is the deployment of a number of personnel groupings and highlighting players' individual skill sets in ways that are super problematic for any defense out there. I mean, obviously the emergence of a true freshman tight end who, there were high billings for, but he far exceeded any realistic expectations as to what you can get out of an incoming freshman. I mean, Bowers has really just set a new bar as to what that can be, and he didn't do it alone. I think the opportunities that were provided him in the system, you just look at the ways in which he's used, inline tight end, slot wide receiver, in motion, the way he's played at some of the outside positions, X and Z in various formations. And I'm highlighting him to speak on a broader topic, and that's Coach Monken's ability to utilize individual skill sets that make this offense run. And I could do the same thing for James Cook, or the fact that the wide receiver room has changed throughout the season, and McConkey has certainly had his games, and A.D. Mitchell has shown up from time to time, depending on situations. And I think that's a testament. Anytime you lose really your top 1, 2, 3 wide receivers, that can to say that can slow down an offense, I think would be an understatement. And we haven't really felt the effects of Pickens and Blaylock and Burton in ways that most offenses would. And I think that's to Coach Monken's credit, of just finding ways to generate offense where others could be pointing towards excuses. Now, I'd say this: I think Georgia, what makes this season special, what makes this run to a national championship realistic, is on the defensive side of the ball. And Yes, against Michigan, it's going to be important for Georgia to generate offense and put points on the board. But I think the story has been and will remain that this team is identified, its identity is centralized around that defensive side of the ball. And I think what we want to see is, against high-level talent, against a good Michigan, well-balanced team, is it the Georgia defense that we saw for 12 weeks that's really who they are, or is it one that we happened to witness in our last game against Alabama that you saw a lot more warts and holes in the defense than what we were accustomed to throughout the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, but it's actually something you said before that I want to touch on just for a moment. You mentioned Brock Bowers, and I don't think this can be overstated, that as good as Bowers is, in a less effective offensive scheme, we may not see the best of Brock Bowers the way that we have right now. It's not a no-brainer that a tight end is going to go out there and dominate a football game. It takes some sort of schematic advantage to be able to do that, because you could always just improve. If you're a defense, you can always just improve the kind of guy you have covering a guy like that. In other words, you can take a safety off him, put a cornerback on there if you need to, or there's all kinds of ways in which you could try to shut down a Brock Bowers if you wanted to. But the fact that Bowers continues to have the success that he's had, I think, speaks to the quality of the offense that he's playing in. That in an inferior offense, maybe the kind of thing that Georgia would have had prior to Todd Monken's arrival here, there's a chance that Brock Bowers is just a guy. But in an offense like the one that Todd Monken's put together, a guy like Bowers has a chance to really flourish. And it's not a given that would have happened in an inferior offensive scheme to me, John.
No, and you have to be willing to adjust and improvise and highlight individual players when they possess the skill sets that Brock Bowers does. And, I hate to make any comparison to a team in orange and blue, but Kyle Pitts and what they did with him last year, I think was kind of set this table for how you can use tight ends, and for a true freshman to come in and be able to not only have plays designed for him and have his number called, but for him to step up and answer the bell the way that he has, I think is a testament to the special nature of the type player he is. I mean, it has been really impressive to see, not only he gets those opportunities, but the number of times where he takes the mundane and makes it truly special. Case in point would be that slant route in what was it, the last game of the season, or was that Alabama, where you turn a slant route into a 60-plus yard touchdown just because he's got the extra gear. Is that Georgia Tech? They're running together, BA.
Yeah, and listen, this time of year, it all just kind of runs together a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's...
But,
Go ahead.
He's a special guy. He's a special guy, but you have to have the willingness and ability to create opportunities for him. And I think that's what Monken has done really well. He's one example of it, and there's many others that we could point to that say, you're coaching at a high level. It's not checkers we're playing out there.
No, I think that's exactly right. I want to ask you about mindset going into the game coming up in a moment. Before that, let me remind folks, though, this is our classic City Lager Insider Update with John Stinchcomb. Great breakdown of Georgia each and every week here on this program from John, and a great chance for you as you're heading towards your holiday time of the year. I was at some parties here this weekend. A lot of you doing the same thing. Always have that classic City Lager in my hand as I'm heading out for one of these Christmas events, and I hope you'll do the same thing there. From Creature Comforts Brewing Company, it's just good cold beer. I'm a simple guy. I like simple things. I like things that taste good, and that's what Creature Comforts Brewing Company is all about. Craft-style lager, so while it's lighter in color, there's no sacrifice in flavor. Incredible flavor, terrific enjoyment from Creature Comforts and the work they do to make sure every one of their products tastes delicious. This may be one of my favorite of all, Classic City Lager. You can pick some up wherever you're doing your shopping. So it's available 6 and 12-pack cans really all year long. Some craft specialties are seasonal. This is not a seasonal beer. This is available all the time. So make sure you check out some Classic City Lager. It is just good, cold beer, Classic City Lager from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. A taste in Athens, but you don't have to be in Athens to enjoy it. You can pick it up wherever you're doing your shopping here today. So, John, I was listening to the Jim Harbaugh press conference from introductory Orange Bowl press conference from a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about how there was a kind of a mindset that Michigan had to play with in the sort of final part of the season, and he's really right. If you go back and look, when they lost on October 30th to Michigan State, they essentially knew that every game they played after that was an elimination game. So you win against Indiana, you go on the road, win at Penn State, you go on the road, you dominate Maryland, you obviously win the regular season finale against Ohio State, and in very impressive fashion, blow out Iowa in the Big Ten title game. That Michigan really had a different mindset final month of the season than Georgia did, because on the date that Michigan lost to Michigan State, that's the same date that Georgia clinched the SEC East, knowing it had really very easy games coming after that. And I'm not making excuses for Georgia losing the SEC championship. I'm just saying that Michigan has had kind of a playoff mentality now for more than a month. Jim Harbaugh talked about that a couple of weeks ago. And so now that Georgia's margin for error has gone away too, is there a chance that we do see a little bit of a rebooted mindset from Georgia going to the Orange Bowl, where it is win or go home now? Your season is over if you lose. Is there a chance that extra motivation kind of provides maybe the extra edge that a team like Georgia needs, that maybe Michigan's been playing with now for quite some time?
I hope so. I also think that it's to Georgia's advantage that there's such a window of time between the conference championship game and the first round of the college football playoffs, because Michigan was playing really good ball. And anytime I like our matchup. If I were, I'm not a gambler, but if I were to put money on a team, I think Georgia is still the team to beat, especially heading into this week or into this game. But Michigan was playing their best ball, and having a period of time where maybe they're not clicking quite the way they were at the end of the season. That's not a bad thing for Georgia, and it hopefully gives Georgia the opportunity to really hone back in on what they were doing and who they were when we were playing our best ball. And the season, the way they were set up, was much different in that Georgia's most meaningful games came in the beginning and middle of the season, and that last quarter of the season was really an opportunity for them to get healthy and just work on maintaining more than having their backs pressed against the wall the way Michigan's was. And to Michigan's credit, the way they responded after that loss to Michigan State, I think, is a testament to the quality of opponent that Georgia's about to face. And so it's going to be a good game, but I at least expect it to be. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully Georgia runs away with it. But the way Michigan's playing, that they've proven themselves to be a very capable team.
John, great stuff. Thanks for being here for our Classic City Lager Insider Update. We certainly appreciate your time, and we will get a chance to speak to you again this week as a part of our chase for the championship, which I'm really looking forward to. But obviously, this will be our last time on DawgNation Daily before Christmas. So hope you have a great Christmas. Hope it's fun for you and your family, and you get everything you want. Your kids get everything they want. And obviously, hopefully, we'll all get what we want come Orange Bowl time with a victory against the Michigan Wolverines. Thank you once again for allowing us to help preview all of that.
Absolutely. It's good times. I think for most Dog fans, our ultimate gift would, or at least for the season, will come on December 31st and again in January. But wishing you and yours a Merry Christmas and a Go Dogs.
There you go, John. Good stuff. Thanks for your time.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I love Christmas. I always have. It's just it's a fun time of year, and I'm very much like the Griswolds. We get into decorating, we get into all that kind of stuff. We get, way too much, for our kids come Christmas time. We just like doing all of that, and I always will. I'm very much into all the holiday things, and so I hope all of you, concurrent to our enjoyment of the playoff and what's going on with Georgia football, hopefully you're all getting ready to enjoy a great Christmas too, because it truly is a great time of year indeed. And you know what? What makes Christmas so much fun is knowing that the new year is going to be really fun there too, because as Kenny Chesney once said, all you want for Christmas is a real good tan. Well, guess what we get a chance to get? A real good tan ourselves coming up in really just a few months when you start thinking about the DawgNation Cruise. And I've heard from some of you, and by the way, there'll be a little bit of this on our Golden Shoe later on in the show here today, but I've heard from some of you that you're making plans to be with us. DawgNation Cruise setting sail come April 25th. April 25th through the 29th, we're leaving out of Port Canaveral. You've heard me say this before. Going to Nassau in the Bahamas. Going to Perfect Day, Coco Cay. Private Island. Unbelievable. Thrill side, chill side. So many fun things to do on Perfect Day, Coco Cay. We're going to be doing that, and we want you to be a part of it too, because it's not just going to be a cruise. It's going to be a DawgNation cruise on board the Independence of the Seas, but special DawgNation-themed events going on the entire time there as well. This is the biggest thing we've ever done at DawgNation. It's going to be the most fun thing up until now we've ever done at DawgNation. But for it to be as fun as it possibly can be, we need you on board there as well. So DawgNation.com, link at the very top of the homepage, will connect you with our friends, the Cruise and Vacation Authority. That's the only partner we would use to help get a cruise like this going. We got to have great experts kind of providing that infrastructure support for us of getting everybody on board and getting everybody happy. That's what the Cruise and Vacation Authority is going to provide. So please make sure you check them out. But use DawgNation.com, the link there at the top of the page, to help you get you there for that. April 25th through the 29th with our friends at Royal Caribbean on board Independence of the Seas. This is going to be a great time. Can't wait to see you there for that. All right, let's go cruise around the SEC here for a minute, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. And big news for Dan Lanning in the fact that he's acquired his new quarterback at Oregon, and it's an SEC name. It's Bo Nix, leaving Auburn to go to Oregon. And obviously the thing that gets a lot of attention here is that Nix, who's already played Georgia 3 times in his career, lost all 3 of those, will now open the 2022 season, presumably as Oregon starting quarterback against Georgia. So the Georgia-Oregon game to begin next season in Atlanta already has a ton of storylines. The presence of Bo Nix now adds to that. But let me also say this for a moment, and I'm really impressed with this. Think about the Georgia staffers who've gone on to become head coaches. Sam Pittman leaving Georgia to go to Arkansas. Mel Tucker leaving to go to Colorado, then moving pretty quickly to Michigan State. Now Dan Lanning going to Oregon. Aren't you impressed with these guys? Seem to hit the ground running. They pretty clearly have a plan in place. Like, it took Dan Lanning 5 minutes to acquire Bo Nix. And listen, I watched Nix a lot this year. Honestly, I thought Nix played some pretty good football. And if you're looking for, this is an Oregon program that needs desperate help at the quarterback spot. This is not the days of Marcus Mariota or, some of the guys they've, had there in the past. Dennis Dixon, is that the name that kind of comes up here? This is not those days for Oregon at the quarterback spot anymore. They've really struggled. Anthony Brown, the transfer into that program, did not play well. They need to be better at the quarterback spot. And given the way that Bo Nix played a time for Auburn this year, I think he's an upgrade of what they've had there at the quarterback position. And it's amazing to me how Lanning, still working at Georgia, he's only a part-time head coach at Oregon right now, but he's pretty clearly had a plan in place. He's executing that. It's really no different than when Pittman got to Arkansas. And Pittman couldn't have known that as an offensive line coach, he'd get a chance to be Arkansas head coach. That all had to happen for him very fast. But he got Barry Odom hired as a defensive coordinator, got Kendall Briles hired as an offensive coordinator, got Felipe Franks to transfer into the program, had a very successful first year, endured a brutal schedule, endured the pandemic, had first-year success there, set himself up for more success in his second year. He had a plan in place taking that job. Frankly, Mel Tucker wasn't at Colorado very long, but he hired Jay Johnson. He had guys that he wanted to hire. Went to Michigan State, utilized the transfer portal very well. Like, the one thing that you can say about these Kirby guys, or to flip this around, the one thing you can't say about Tucker or Pittman or now Lanning, they're not ill-prepared. They are not just kind of feeling their way around the dark. They get these jobs, and they put a plan in place pretty quick. Compare that a little bit to Brian Kelly, by the way, who we told you off the very top of the program got allegedly turned down by Todd Monken for his offensive coordinator role. We told you this last week that pretty quietly, one of the interesting stories in the SEC right now is that Brian Kelly can't seem to convince other coaches to take the money from LSU the way that he wanted to. We highlighted some of the ways in which he's kind of gotten turned down. Couldn't get Tommy Rees to leave Notre Dame and come be his offensive coordinator. Also lost it on Marcus Freeman too, but Freeman became a head coach. You don't really fault him for that. Joe Brady was back on the open market. We thought that might be a name for LSU. That hasn't really materialized. He was turned down by Brad Davis, the Kentucky defensive coordinator. LSU getting turned down by a Kentucky guy. That's a little bit weird. And now it looks like Brian Kelly is turned his attention now to a guy named Matt House as his next defensive coordinator. This is the linebackers coach at Kansas City with the Chiefs. He's also a former Kentucky defensive coordinator. But it seems like Brian Kelly, upon taking the LSU job, he bounces to that school, gets the money, gets a chance to win at the high level, win the national championship, something I believe that he doesn't think he could have done there at LSU. But compare this to the Georgia guys like a Dan Lanning, who has a plan in place, executes that plan pretty quickly. Brian Kelly seems to have very little idea of who his coordinator is going to be, who his key hire is going to be as assistant coaches. Not to say that he won't find capable guys when you have this much money to throw around there. Eventually you'll hire somebody. But how many times are we going to see LSU get turned down for these big-name coordinators when a guy like Brian Kelly is supposed to be bringing some gravitas to that role as head coach there at LSU, but hiring assistants has proven not to be very easy for Kelly thus far. We told you about this last week. It was worth paying attention to. He's now been turned down again on both sides of the ball, so we'll find out when Kelly does finally kind of land some of those assistant coaching names. I also want to mention this for a moment. So Steve Spurrier is doing a radio interview in Tampa, and Dan Mullen comes up. Now, at a certain point, we've kind of kicked around Mullen all we can. That's kind of gone out of style now in terms of making fun of Dan Mullen. So me bringing this up really isn't about mockery. I actually think that Spurrier brings up a couple of pretty interesting points on all of this. So he kind of talks about when things go south for Mullen there at Florida, and the thing that he brings up is the game against LSU last season. And the thing that Spurrier cites specifically is the decision not to play Kyle Pitts, even though the belief was that Pitts was healthy enough to play. They kind of held him out because Florida had already clinched the SEC East. And it's very easy to forget this. Florida was about a 20-point favorite that day at home against LSU, and so maybe there was the belief that that game was going to be an easy game for Florida to win. Well, as it turns out, the thrown shoe, and they lose the game and then go on to lose to Alabama in the SEC Championship. The game was close, but they lost, and they got embarrassed in the bowl game, and that really kind of set the tone for what Mullen has dealt with this year. I think Spurrier's words on this should be considered for a moment, and I almost hope this is true because I think it speaks well for the kind of changes that do need to occur in college football. What Spurrier's suggesting here is that by Florida not taking the LSU game very seriously, what Spurrier compared it to is an NFL team that knows it's got a playoff spot secured, so therefore just plays its backups down the stretch and kind of the garbage time at the end of the season. Spurrier says that's what he thought Florida did last year against LSU. And that we know for a fact that Mullen acknowledged that in the bowl game, the loss to Oklahoma wasn't even a real game. And what we said at the time was, what we've said throughout every time this comes up, is that you can't just turn it on and turn it off. And you've heard me use this phrase before, how you do anything is how you do everything. If you act like the LSU game doesn't matter, if you act like the Oklahoma Bowl game doesn't matter, then all of a sudden when it's time to play games that you do think matter, you've trained your team to go half speed. You've trained your team to not care about every play, not take every play as seriously as every other play. And it looked like this year that Florida essentially quit on Dan Mullen, essentially quit on themselves, quit on each other. And some of the quit late last season seems to have bled into the 2021 season. I think Spurrier's words on this are pretty important. And I think for a lot of programs right now are kind of dealing with, how do you handle these down-the-stretch games? How do you handle these bowl games that have become more like exhibitions? I think we've seen from Kirby Smart when they haven't been in the college football playoff. Let me get anybody who's not fully bought in, let me get them out. Go do something else. Go somewhere else. And maybe you can even come back next year, but if you're not all bought in right now, I can't have you around my team. We've got to treat this seriously. The guys who are playing need to treat this game seriously. And I think that Mullen did make some mistakes down the stretch last year in regards to that. I don't think Spurrier's wrong for saying what he said. It's the kind of thing that coaches this year during bowl season, during those late season games, which you're kind of out of running for your division. It's the kind of thing that maybe everybody should be paying attention to, because when you look at the reasons why Dan Mullen went from being a coach of he had a lot of respect in the media and places like that to where it kind of turned out to be late. I think that you have to look at the way they handled their business down the stretch last year as maybe a time which all of that went wrong. I saw where Walter Nolan, the 5-star signee for Texas A&M, has addressed some NIL rumors. Some Vols fans, because Nolan most recently had lived in Knoxville, was going to a Knoxville area high school, that a lot of Vols fans say, well, the reason why A&M won this recruiting battle, stole him away, even though I don't know that a lot of folks necessarily thought Nolan was going to Tennessee simply because he was living in Knoxville, but obviously Tennessee fans wanted that to be true. And so they pushed the rumor that, well, the only reason this happened is because of the NIL. That's the only reason this happened. He got big NIL dollars, and therefore he went to Texas A&M. For some reason, this rumor's been out there with Texas A&M kind of a lot. Nolan's kind of shot this down, saying that if he really wanted to get NIL money, the place for him to get that would have been staying in Knoxville. Now, when he says NIL money, I'm not quite sure what he means by that. I told you this last week, that people have a tendency to use NIL as kind of a catch-all phrase for a lot of different things. I don't believe there's been enough specific reporting related to what NIL actually is. But Nolan addressed this head on there this week about why it was he chose Texas A&M instead of maybe going to a place like Tennessee, which Vols fans wanted him to do, given the fact that he was living there in Knoxville. Finally, there's this. Speaking of Tennessee, Cade Mays just kind of come out and said it, that in order to come back to Tennessee next season, he wants, I believe the phrase he's used is like 3rd or 4th round money. That's kind of what he said, about $500,000, about what that would be. That's what he wants to come back to Tennessee next year. And listen, around here, we kind of operate on the belief that we treat coaches and players very differently. Like, you'll hear me get on coaches. I don't really get on players very much. I almost never make fun of rival players, make fun of rival coaches all the time. I will criticize a Georgia coach. Don't really do as much critical specifically of Georgia players. I mean, listen, if a guy plays badly, we're going to admit that. But in terms of, how intense that criticism becomes, I'm just more comfortable criticizing a coach than I am criticizing a player. I say this all the time, that for me, big platform like this, DawgNation, we're going to punch up. We're not going to punch down. In other words, I'm going to go after people who make more money than me. I'm going to go after people who have a bigger platform than me. That's what college coaches are. Most college players are not quite like that. They don't have as big a platform. Some do, but not all of them do. Some of them in the future may be making a lot of money, but most of them now have less financial resources for doing what they do than I have for doing what I do here. So therefore, when I turn my spotlight on something, the platform that DawgNation gives me, I'm going to turn it towards a coach, not towards a player. That's just the general rule that we kind of operate on. However, if a guy like Cade Mays is going to be like, hey, I need $500,000 in order to come back to Tennessee, well, at that point in time, then it becomes a little more appropriate to treat Mays like you would kind of treat a coach at that point in time. In other words, it becomes fair to ask, well, has your level of play actually been worth the $500,000? All of a sudden now you're not just a player that went to somebody's high school and, you're going to kind of keep those warm, fuzzy feelings going. All of a sudden now you're a professional that wants to be treated that way. That means being evaluated like a professional. And based on what I saw from Cade Mays this year, I guess I'm kind of left to wonder, do Vols fans think that level of play is worth $500,000? Because if he could get 3rd and 4th round money in the NFL, I think you just go get that from the league, right? This notion of, hey, I'll come back here if you'll give me NFL money. But listen, if you're worth NFL money, you'd be in the NFL. And so in this kind of new era in which we live in, name, image, likeness stuff, I don't fault Mays for being, candid and open about all this. I don't fault that. But if you're going to say it, then I think the conversation needs to be had of, are you really worth the money? And I think that based on the way that he played at Tennessee, at least what I saw, I'm not quite so sure that he was. And frankly, if he was kind of worth that from an NFL standpoint, he'd probably be going to the league. So nonetheless, interesting stuff. We'll make that your SEC through. Cruise around the SEC, of course, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. And I want to get back to that chess match that's going to be going on for the Orange Bowl here between Monken, who we've talked about, and what's happening on the defensive side there with the Michigan Wolverines in a moment. Before that, though, let me talk to you about my friends at Space Dogs here. I try to stay up to date on what's going on in the world. Some topics, though, are a little harder to follow than others, and one of those for me is crypto. You hear folks talk about crypto all the time, and you're kind of left to wonder, well, what is this really? Well, I have some idea, but the folks at Space Dogs have actually done a good job in allowing me to understand even more about kind of how cryptocurrency is relevant for my life. At its basic essence, it's just a more safe, secure way to make transactions online, the things you're kind of already doing anyway, can be made better and more secure with crypto, and the kind of thing that Space Dogs can help acquaint you with. So if you'll check out their website, trust me, they are better at explaining this than I am. So if you don't do anything else with what I tell you, at least check out the website. It's dogs.io. That's DAWGS, good dog people know how to spell dogs, DAWGS, dogs.io. And you can see all the products that Space Dogs offer and allow them and these products to help take the mystery out of crypto for you, whether it's the new Dogs token, which is kind of a cool thing to examine, or you want the Dogs wallet, you want the Space card. These are just more safe, more secure ways to use crypto and to make better transactions online, or whatever transaction you're kind of a part of here. Space Dogs can just help you with all of that. So please check them out. Space Dogs online at dogs.io. That website, once again, dogs.io. Take the mystery out of crypto. Check out the Dogs token. Check out the Dogs wallet. Check out the Space card. These great new products from our friends at Space Dogs. This is really very good stuff. So I told John Stinchcomb this a moment ago, and I do believe this is true, that when you think about the college football playoff, when you think about what's about to go down for Georgia, I think Monken, who we started today's show by saying has reportedly turned down a chance to leave UGA, which would presume big bucks from LSU. Apparently Todd Monken wants to stay at UGA. Having him all in for the college football playoff, having him all in and doing more of what he's already done for the UGA offense, this could be a really big deal. Big deal specifically against Michigan. And the chess match here is going to be fascinating because we know how good the Michigan defense has been. You think about Aiden Hutchinson, the award circuit stuff that he's been a part of, the overall numbers for what Michigan's done defensively this year. We know how good it is. And it's kind of interesting. The defensive mastermind of all this is a guy named Mike McDonald, who has a lot of ties to the state of Georgia. In fact, our buddy Connor Riley, who I don't think can hear me right now because he's working. Yeah, he's a Centennial guy, right? Connor's producing today. Did you know him at all? Not overlapping time-wise. But he's been a Centennial guy, worked at Cedar Shoals. This is a guy that's got a lot of high school ties to the state of Georgia. It's actually there'll be a lot of stories written about this. It's actually a pretty amazing climb up the coaching ranks for him, who's connected to John Harbaugh, worked at the Baltimore Ravens, now at Michigan. Very respected guy. It's actually kind of a cool story, and he's done a great job with the Michigan defense. And so McDonald on the other side for Michigan, chess match with Todd Monken, that's going to be such a sharp battle of wits between these two coaches. So with that in mind, let's go back to a couple of weeks ago. Upon realizing that it's Michigan that's going to be playing Georgia, Jim Harbaugh talked about the decision to hire McDonald, what he's brought to the table for the Michigan defense, the way in which he kind of draws up those X's and O's for the Wolverines defensively. This is a name that Georgia fans need to know, this Harbaugh from the other day.
When I was looking to hire a defensive coordinator, back in January, reached out to a lot of football people and reached out to my brother, and he recommended Mike. And the greatest impact that he's had on our team is he's really smart, really good teacher, brings a lot of energy, brings a lot of intelligence, and great communicator. All those things. Guys love playing for him. Really, they're stimulated by all the football situations, by all the football knowledge, and just gets. I see our guys just are really into it, and it's been that way since day one.
So what I said is true. McDonald versus Monken's amazing coaching chess match. We're going to be following and covering that pretty closely. I do have to confess one thing for a moment. I had not watched the Jim Harbaugh press conference for the Orange Bowl until this morning. Y'all, this is the worst press conference I have ever heard. Like Kirby Smart, I think, wears it as a badge of honor that he doesn't really give the media anything. That Smart likes to keep his cards close to the vest. And when it comes to the quarterback topic, as we sit off the top of the program, that has a way of frustrating some Georgia fans. I do get that. There are other times when Smart not really giving the media very much makes him more popular. people like to see the media kind of kicked around a little bit. Sometimes Smart kind of withholds what media wants, and people kind of enjoy that. But you think that Kirby Smart is overly dry in these press conferences, that Smart is intentionally boring in a press conference? You haven't seen anything until you watch 20 minutes of Jim Harbaugh. It's the most boring press conference chatter I've ever seen in my life. So here's what I want to do for a couple of minutes. I want to give you not a showdown between Harbaugh and Kirby. We're going to do a bore down. And I want to show you Kirby Smart trying to be boring. And then I want you to see how, by comparison, it's not boring at all. By comparison, it's way more interesting than what Jim Harbaugh brings to the table. So Smart was asked about Michigan same weekend as the clip you just heard. And at the time, I remember kind of joking that this was the most Kirby Smart compliment of all, what he said about Michigan. Like, Smart was so in character about what he says he notices about Michigan and what he's impressed with when it comes to Michigan. But by comparison, this might as well be a Dave Chappelle stand-up comedy routine in comparison to the absolute tedium that Jim Harbaugh put forth in his press conference. So let's do a bore-down comparison here. This is Kirby Smart trying to be at his most boring best, but failing in comparison to Jim Harbaugh. Kirby first, take a listen.
Biggest thing that I noticed was the physicality they played with last night, the leadership they had. I was thoroughly impressed with the interviews that I saw among their players post-game. I think you can always kind of tell, where a team stands and what they're all about by what they talk about, the messaging. And to hear those guys talk after the game was really impressive. That they're a senior-laden, senior-driven team that leads that way.
So, I mean, that clip is honestly a little bit of a cure for insomnia, right? You go into the leadership thing, physicality, that's always kind of a crutch to kind of lean on. Impressed with the senior-laden nature of the team. Like, you can sort of feel your eyelids kind of starting to get a little heavy. You kind of lean your head back. You could pretty well go to sleep on the basis of that. But in the same press conference, though, and I'm not going to play this clip for you because I don't really have time to, Smart also talked about how his son had been watching a lot of YouTube clips of Aiden Hutchinson, and his son knew all about his stats and stuff like that. Smart had at least seen their post-game interviews after winning the Big Ten title game. That there's actually a little bit of color there. There's actually a little bit of personality there from Smart when talking about Michigan. By comparison, I don't know that Jim Harbaugh has ever seen Georgia play a football game, not once in his entire life, even though his brother-in-law, Tom Crean's obviously the Georgia basketball coach. Like, you think Kirby Smart is boring in press conferences? Take a listen to this bore-down showdown between Smart and Harbaugh, how boring Harbaugh's description of Georgia is. Can you imagine 20 minutes of this droning on? This is the most boring clip we've ever played in the history of DawgNation, but nonetheless, Harbaugh on Georgia. Take a listen.
Yeah, super impressed with the playmakers. There's quite a few guys on the roster, offense, defense. Guys that we remember recruiting and watching in high school, and now to see them as expected being great players in college. That physical, rugged team in the lines, and skilled players, smart players. The schemes, you don't know what they're trying to accomplish. We're really, when you're watching it on TV, but it jumps out to you pretty quick that there's not a lot of mental error. There's not a lot of people going the wrong way or doing things that you wouldn't want your players doing if you're a coach. So all those things and are the things that first jump out at you.
This is like every book report I ever wrote my entire school career. Like, he's just trying to get 800 words. He doesn't know a single Georgia player's name. Doesn't know one. Now, by now he does. He's been working on Georgia. He says they recruited some of these guys. Like, yeah, they got playmakers, they got offense, they got defense, they got whatever else. I mean, this is like me trying to sort of BS my way through a book that I clearly didn't read. One of those things of, I thought the point the book made was outstanding. It's really one of those things that should be considered by everybody, blah, 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 blah. Like, he doesn't have the first idea about Georgia. I think it'll be very interesting to watch. Once we get to South Florida, once we get ready for true Orange Bowl week, get past Christmas, we'll be live down in South Florida after that. The bore down between Kirby and Harbaugh of who can say the least in these press conferences is actually going to be pretty amazing. And you think that Kirby keeps his cards close to the vest? The entire Harbaugh press conference, everything you just heard right there. I mean, he's not saying anything. So Kirby may have met his match when it comes to press conference boredom. I have never seen one more boring than what Jim Harbaugh brought to the table. So with that, we'll wrap up the program. A lot of golden shoes to give out today, so let's just kind of jump in these and do these pretty quickly. Let's throw the first one up here on the screen here for a moment. Obviously, always fun to get your submissions at DawgNation Daily. Chris on Twitter sends this to me about Urban Meyer as character in Friday. Chris Tucker's character saying, how are you going to get fired on your day off? Yeah, the Meyer thing continues to be a pretty big deal. I saw where he spoke to the NFL Network yesterday, and folks still making fun of Urban Meyer. A little Friday reference, never a bad thing there. Shame to see Urban Meyer get fired. Georgia on Tap, and I say shame sarcastically. Georgia on Tap shares this on Twitter there as well. Of course, our mascot around here is Eddie the Blind Squirrel. Of course, cousin Eddie, formerly Florida football coach. Georgia on Tap says, looks like Dan Mullen found a new gig with the DOT, making safety signs. This one says, cousin Eddie says Twitter's full, put down the phone, kind of a play on one of the lines from Christmas Vacation. So pretty funny stuff there. Our buddy Bryce Dixon also talking DawgNation Cruise. He expects to be with us there for that. I've heard from so many, our buddy Wise Dog, Bryce Dixon, so many others going to be on that DawgNation Cruise. Cannot wait to be with all of you in April there for that. Give it to yourself or somebody you love here for this holiday season. DawgNation Cruise is going to be a lot of fun, and then one more to share there with you as well. Another golden shoe winner to Michael Sumner, who's enjoying himself some Classic City Lager as he enjoys bowl season. Yeah, a good old beer and some bowl season, that's a good way to spend this holiday time of year. And so Michael Sumner's got some Classic City Lager with him as he does that, so we'll give him a golden shoe there as well. And, of course, we'll remind you, Gator Hater Countdown, 313 days from now. Dogs against those lousy, stinking Gators. We'll see you there for that. And then back tomorrow live once again for DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to seeing you then, everybody. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to there for all of that. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That is what R.S. Andrews will do for you. We're going to be pretty quick with comments today. We've done a lot of comments as of late. So we'll let you say your piece, and then we're going to bounce out of here after that. Let me start on YouTube. I don't believe I've done that in a while. So check out R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com. If your water heater goes out, in any case, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. So check them out for that. Also, we'll be back with our buddy Dari Payro for Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We'll do some bowl picks with you next week there as well on that. Trey Beck says, does Stetson leave for the NFL? No, I'm guessing that's probably not the case. I really don't know what Stetson's doing next year, but probably not leaving for the NFL right now. Thomas Robinson says Monken might be excited about Vandegrift and Gunnar Stockton in the near future. Yeah, I think he probably should be. Davis Painter says, who should be the starting receivers in 2 weeks? Yeah, listen, I hope that George Pickens is healthy enough to play more. I think that'd be great news for UGA. He is clearly, when fully healthy, the one guy other than Brock Bowers that gives you that dominant, dynamic offensive presence. And it's just a real shame that Georgia hasn't had that all season long. Let's see what else. Here's a comment from Robert Clark who says, how is the Stetson JT situation any different from the Emory Jones AR-15 issue at Florida? Fans with limited info want something different than the coach with the full picture. We know how that turned out. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the way the chatter went on about that, it was pretty similar. Florida fans were convinced really that AR-15 was the better of the guys. At least that was kind of what I saw, and I think the results kind of left some information lacking there on that. Aaron Dixon says there was some live chat beef. Yeah, I mean, look, here's what I try to do. like the world is filled with a lot of very serious topics. And sometimes getting upset about a serious topic makes sense, right? I mean, there are things far more important in life than football. And sometimes, getting your blood pressure up over something that's really important makes some sense. There's a justifiable reason to be angry about serious issues sometimes. However, knowing that there's a lot of anger in the world, one of the things that I try to do is turn down the anger on this show. It's just not worth getting super mad about. It's just not. I try to have, look, Georgia football is a great topic to do a show about. It's a serious topic to a lot of people, but I try not to take myself too seriously, and I try to keep a little levity in place around some of the things that we discuss here. And I just think other people would be happy if they would also do the same thing. Like, the one thing I'm not going to do is, I'm not going to, intentionally try to stir y'all up or intentionally try to do anything like that. It'd be very easy to do that. I just don't want to do that. Mark Morris says, Dog's going to be stoked. I can already see some smoke from all the way down here in Florida. Yeah, Mark is living right there off 75 on the way down to South Florida. So if Mark's already getting the evidence of that, then you better believe it's going to be down there in Miami here pretty soon too. Paul Moon says the major issue is that we're not even giving JT a chance. It's clear that we're limited with Stetson Bennett, but we're not even letting JT play. If we turn to Daniels and lose, I'll happily shut up. So I think Paul's comment is a very interesting one on a number of fronts. As I told you before, that when we try to have the open debate about who should play quarterback, and I invited your feedback about the fact-based evidence for why it should be Stetson, I should say why it should be JT over Stetson. What I told you at the time was the argument that I personally found the most convincing was that JT was undefeated or is undefeated. Stetson had lost his last 2 games against Alabama. That maybe it makes some sense just to try something different. That's the argument to me that's the most convincing. It's absolutely the most convincing that, hey, maybe it's just worth trying something different. Now, the one thing that makes me different maybe than Paul and maybe different than some of you is if Georgia doesn't do that, and it doesn't appear they're going to, then there must be some sort of reasoning on the part of Monken and Smart for why that is. And but if I was going to make my argument for JT, the most convincing argument is the fact that, hey, why not just try something different? However, what Paul says at the end there, I find to be pretty interesting. That Paul says if they try JT and that doesn't work, then I'll happily shut up. And maybe Paul would, but I'm starting to believe that maybe some of you wouldn't, because I don't know. I mean, it just feels like there's kind of a lot of excuses. Like for everything that hasn't gone perfectly for JT, there's always just a ton of excuses for why that was. Well, he didn't have blah, blah, blah in this game, or he didn't have blah, blah, blah in that game. That if JT were to play against Michigan and not play well, it'd be, well, he hasn't played in 6 weeks. What did you expect from him? It's one of those things where there's just a certain attempt to move the goalpost no matter what. That folks say, JT's clearly proven to be the better quarterback. And then you say, well, why didn't he throw a touchdown against Clemson then? Well, you got to understand he didn't have blah, blah, blah playing this game, whatever else. That anytime you point out something that's less than clear and compelling evidence for why JT's obviously the better quarterback, there's always some sort of excuse being made for why JT wasn't great that day. Like, why did he only throw 1 touchdown against Cincinnati? Well, he had blah, 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 blah. There's an excuse at the ready. I'm sort of the belief that if the Georgia fans that want JT, and I'd like to see JT too, but the Georgia fans who are so over the top about wanting to see JT, that if he did play and didn't play well, they'd find a way to blame Kirby for that too. Well, he didn't play him in 6 weeks. What did you expect from him? That there are some people that have so much of their online persona, at stake based on JT Daniels, that if Daniels did play and didn't play well, I can promise you that most people wouldn't concede the fact that they were just wrong the whole time. They just wouldn't do that. R.W. Tyndall says, you're playing ifs and buts, but we are just calling it like we see it on the field. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's what everybody thinks they're doing. Low Elo Joe says, you think Harbaugh will know some UGA players after the game? Yeah, listen, I think he will. And to be fair, I'm not saying that Harbaugh is overlooking Georgia or disrespecting Georgia. I just think Harbaugh is extraordinarily boring. And, Kirby at least can fake it somewhat well. Like, I mean, pretty clearly when Kirby was doing the press conference, he wasn't super acquainted with Michigan either, but at least he told kind of a funny story about his son. Like, Harbaugh doesn't even try to do that. I mean, really and truly, Harbaugh is worse with the media stuff than Kirby is, and frankly makes Kirby seem like he's, Johnny Media. R.W. Tyndall says we better beat Harbaugh, please. Yeah, a lot of folks have kind of forgotten about Harbaugh over the course of the last few years. He's kind of become a little bit of an irrelevant figure around college football after at one point in time being the most talked about guy in the sport. I mean, the way in which like Deion Sanders has been talked about so much the last week. This is what the Harbaugh conversation was like about 4 years ago or so, 5 years ago, that he was supposedly this transformational figure for the sport. He's doing the satellite camps and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Harbaugh was this very big deal at the time. And he's lost so much in recent years that he kind of lost some of that relevance. Well, I think a lot of Georgia fans are going to reacquaint themselves pretty quick with why Harbaugh is a fun figure to beat up on and beat. And Georgia fans may get pretty acquainted with that pretty quickly. Bill Sanders says, if JT plays, we still lose. No one on here will ever admit it. They will just continue with their absolute fealty. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the concern I would have there a little bit is that, like, one of two things will happen. See, and I noticed this, but it's like one of those things where when you sit on my side and see all the comments, you just see certain things, is that people will just either pretend they never said what they obviously said. See, I don't have that luxury. Like, my name is attached to the show. You can go back and listen to all the old shows. Like, I have to maintain some level of consistency because you could go back and listen to things I've said in the past, whereas the average person can – call Kirby an idiot for not doing what he wants, but then if Georgia wins, he can just pretend he never said that. So there's some of that goes on. But when it comes to, like, certain topics they've kind of backed themselves into a corner on, there is no there will never be any concessions on that whatsoever. Let's see what else. Anything else? Sandy Price on the subject of the defense. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, and John Stinchcomb said this a moment ago, you got to play better defensively. Now, I don't think playing better defensively, necessarily means 17 points. What you do against a team of a much lesser caliber than you is probably not realistic in a college football playoff type game, but you better keep your opponent in the 20s. As I've said before, the perfect recipe for a Georgia championship is Georgia 30, so-and-so 20-something. That's just the perfect recipe for a Georgia championship. I'd take that in the semifinal game against Michigan. I'd take that in the national championship game against whoever Georgia plays. That is the way that Georgia's going to try to win this thing. James Leonard Brown said Harbaugh put sugar in his grits. I believe that's probably true. That's also a very good line. Very good. Let's see what else. Marshall Fleming says, once again, kind of echoing what's been said before, there are some people that just want to try something different if Georgia were to get in that spot. And I understand that. I do understand that. Why some people would just want to try something different. Trust me, I understand that. Avery Sworn says that if Michigan scores 30 points, we lose. I would say that's probably true, that Georgia's got to try to find a way to avoid giving up 30. It's got to try to find a way to score 30. That's just as simple as it gets. Daniel Aldridge says it's very cloudy and rainy today in Florida. I think that's another reason why, if Georgia would have had its way, it would have liked to have gone to Dallas instead of going to Miami, is because you got the indoor stadium in Dallas. Florida's just a rainy place, right? That there is a chance that rain is a factor in the Orange Bowl. And by rule, the SEC championship has to be played with a closed roof. That when you get into a championship situation, if you can take elements out of it, most coaches kind of want to, even though Atlanta in December, like the day of the SEC championship game, would have been a beautiful day to have the roof open. Mercedes-Benz Stadium can be very hot because of the way the roof is designed, that if the sun's shining straight down in like that, it gets very hot when the roof is open. if it's a very hot day outside, but on a pleasant day, it's very nice to have the roof open. But by rule of the SEC championship, they're just never going to do that because they want to have an element-free football game guaranteed. They don't want that decision to be a part of it whatsoever. So at the Orange Bowl, you obviously don't have that. There's a very good chance you have rain, and that could be a factor in that game. Robert Hosea says, if we win the national championship, will you and Jeff and Connor grow beards out until the game against Oregon next year? I did the beard thing not too long ago. I don't know that I'm ready to do that again right now. Jeremy Lloyd says they're expecting very bad weather in Florida this week. I'm sorry to hear that. That'll certainly be something to monitor for the folks. We have a lot of folks who watch us and listen to us from down there in Florida, so hopefully all of you stay safe on that. Somebody said, Mark Goodman on the subject of not getting the other quarterbacks ready. I mean, here's the thing you gotta understand is that I don't care how talented Brock Vandagriff turns out to be. You just can't get 4 quarterbacks ready to play. There's just not enough time to go around. This is not an excuse making. No program does this. Programs aren't simultaneously getting, multiple quarterbacks ready to go. You can say, well, what about Caleb Williams? He stepped in for Oklahoma and played great. He also didn't play great to conclude the season, but there's a reason why Caleb Williams was such an attractive quarterback in a place like Oklahoma, which gets whatever quarterback it wants. There's a reason why they got Caleb Williams. But in terms of what a guy like Vandagriff has or hasn't done this season, or Carson Beck, what he has or hasn't done this season, it's not really a referendum on those guys at all. Georgia simply doesn't have time to get them ready to play. It was trying to get JT Daniels ready to play. Daniels then became unavailable. It looked around and said, okay, let's try to get the guy that's played before ready to play. And with Stetson Bennett, that worked. Georgia scored about 40 points per game this season. Obviously, the SEC championship, the game didn't go well. But, this notion that you're going to, get 4 quarterbacks ready, simultaneously and equally, it's just not the way that football works. It's only by rule a 20-hour work week. You just don't have that much time. That at a certain point, these guys are there trying to absorb what they can get, but Georgia's not preparing Brock Vandagriff to play. They don't have time to. They're not preparing Carson Beck to play. They don't have time to. And that's just the way that all programs are kind of operate. Drew Miller says the Wolverines can play in the snow. We saw that during Ohio State game, but can they also play in the rain? Yeah, we may find out. Let me go to DawgNation.com for a minute. We're going to get out of here. Billy Kay says UGA will not score 30 points against Michigan with Stetson Bennett. Well, the good news on that, Billy, is you can be free to do whatever you want to on New Year's Eve. And I don't mean this sarcastically. I mean this seriously. If you already know the outcome, then don't waste your time. Watch the ball drop or, check out Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve or whatever's on TV. You don't have to worry about it. You can be free to enjoy on New Year's Eve whatever you want to. So just be thankful that you don't have to waste 4 hours. Cincy Dog says, Brock Vandagriff going from high school to SEC football is a big step. I'm sure it's been made, but I expect that he needs some time. Yeah, I mean, I think people have a tendency to kind of assume that the outlier story is a little bit more consistent with what happens. Like a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who was the nation's #1 recruit. I mean, all of this has to factor in this discussion. A guy like Trevor was obviously ready from the word go at Clemson, but he was the nation's #1 recruit, and he is the outlier. And the outlier is not necessarily indicative of what the average 5-star is going to be like. That no one expected Brock Vandagriff to play this year for Georgia, but the fact that he is not playing, the fact that this has not really been his year, doesn't change what his future prospects look like either. I mean, after all, Bryce Young wasn't playing very much for Alabama last year either, and look how good he's turned out to be now. Georgia King 1989 says he'd love for Kirby to give Todd full control over the offensive play calling. There is absolutely zero reason to believe that isn't what he's already done. That there's just zero reason to believe that isn't what he's already done. Randy Hall on the subject of Chris Hinton, a guy from GAC, obviously the son of the former terrific Falcon and Colt Chris Hinton. There were two Hinton brothers. They were both at GAC. Georgia recruited them. Didn't really get super far down the line with either guy. But yeah, that's one of the Georgia ties, state of Georgia ties on that Michigan roster right now. Mark says if you're going to play Brock Vandagriff against Bama, he needs some reps prior. Yeah, they're not going to do that. Brock Vandagriff is not in Georgia's plans this year. He may be the starting quarterback next season, but he's not in Georgia's plans this year. Never really was. That's just not an option. You just can't get 4 quarterbacks ready, equally ready. Let's see what else. Getting ready to go. Paul Moon says, doesn't Gunner play at a lower level? He's a AA school there at Rabun County. Listen, sometimes, I wouldn't get too focused in on the level of play type thing. If you're a program that's succeeding at the level you want to be, it ought to be hard for a true freshman quarterback to step on the field and play for you. Like at Georgia in 2016, it wasn't hard for Jacob Eason to do that. And in 2017, when Eason got hurt, it wasn't hard for Jake Fromm to do that. But that speaks to the overall level of depth in the program that, in 2022, you hope that Georgia's not the kind of place where a true freshman could step in and easily win the quarterback competition. All right, let's see what else. Jeremy Lloyd also reminding us that Jake Fromm got involved with the NFL yesterday, playing for the New York Giants. It was great to see. I didn't really get to see it because I was running around doing a bunch of stuff, but I did see where he played. All right, so good stuff. Steve Highland says about the quarterback situation for next year. Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating competition. It is. And obviously, it's a lot of quarterbacks in the room, and the chances of somebody maybe going somewhere else probably pretty great. But here's the one thing I do believe is that at a place like Georgia, the transfer portal is always going to work out to be a net positive. In other words, whatever Georgia loses, they will more than make up for in what they gain. So that's just, I think, what you can kind of expect there on that. That certainly a quarterback, maybe more than one, but at least a quarterback will probably look to go somewhere else, and players other positions will at least consider that too. Georgia will probably lose something off this current roster, but whatever it has the opportunity to gain will probably end up working out as a net positive for the program all the way around. All right, fun stuff. Let's see what else. Fun stuff. Thanks for being here. Y'all check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online at ajc.com. Boy, what a disaster for the Falcons yesterday. We actually talked this up a little bit last week. This is a game that kind of mattered a little bit for Atlanta. They had you won this one, you really set up the rest of the season to count for something. They got really handled, just easily handled by San Francisco. Bad loss all the way around. D-Led and the AJC crew were out west for the game, though. You can get Falcons coverage online, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Also plenty more ideas about how you can enjoy yourself this holiday season. Make sure you check that out. And, of course, check out R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Heating system, you've been told you need to replace it. R.S. Andrews will give you a second opinion on that. They can actually tell you how you can get your heating unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs and still make its way back through the winter that's on its way. You may not need a new unit. So get it second opinion at R.S. Andrews to find out more about that, rsandrews.com for more details. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Merry Christmas, everybody. We'll talk to you then.